These are crazy. Okay, I have to put this thing is like an insect, but I put it here. I think this, or maybe, I don't know, it's like ears or this way.
We have practiced before.
Okay, we practiced, but, you know, we needed more practice. Okay, here I am, here you are, and I'm delighted to be here. And you're going to talk to me, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going to try.
Okay, this is so weird. You know, wearing this thing and a headset is so weird. Are you getting the translation? Yeah? Yeah? Okay.
Okay. So
as long as you are.
So I'm going to make a little presentation, okay?
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
I'll come over here, then I can listen to you. Move on. Okay.
Bueno, antes de nada, gracias a todos por...
Alright, first of all, thanks everyone for joining us this evening and for following us, and obviously thank you, Jeanette, for sharing this little moment this evening with all of us, and thanks to the Hay Festival in Segovia for making this possible and for bringing her with us to Spain, because it's been quite some time since she last came to Spain, and thanks to the Fundación Telefónica for the facilities to exchange opinions and giving us the chance to listen to such interesting people as Jeanette Winterson. And thank you for having recovered Jeanette's books, and I think that's everything.
That's all.
Shall I come back?
Yeah, please. Don't leave me alone here.
Ines said to me just a few minutes ago, I hate speaking in public.
Okay, you didn't have to say that.
No, I didn't have to say it, but I said it.
Okay, now all of them know my little secret.
Yeah, they do. And they'll know a lot more about both of our secrets by the end of the evening, so don't worry. I'm just turning the volume down because otherwise I'm going to be hospitalized. Hold on. There we go. Let's switch to main. I want less volume.
Let me... okay.
Okay, what do we think of that? You think that's good?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's see. How's that sound? That's a bit better.
Let's try.
No, it's worse. Right, let's talk. You talk to me.
Okay. Bueno, yo voy a hacer una pequeña...
All right, I'll give a very short introduction, and I'm sure all of you know it by heart, and you don't need this introduction because you know Jeanette perfectly well. You know her work, her life, her secret.
Pero bueno, voy a hacer una pequeña intro.
Yes, I'll give a short introduction to put everything into context. I think that for the readers who love literature, literature is a shelter and a shared view shared by certain writers, especially for those writers for which life and literature is one and the same. And this is the case of Jeanette Winterson, who is here with us this evening in Fundación Telefónica Espacio in Madrid. And our author was born in Manchester on the 27th of August in '59, and
Exactly how many years?
So many. You don't.
Okay.
No, we don't go there. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't say we had to talk about everything.
Como digo, fuera de la adopción y como ella escribe en sus memorias,
she writes in her memoirs that after she was adopted, and she was in the wrong cradle. Her adoption family was a family of evangelists living in Accrington, Constance and John. Religious fanaticism, her mom's fanaticism, was a condemnation for her, because she used to spend whole nights out on the street punished for doing something wrong, some heavenly prescription. When she was 11, she wrote sermons and she was preaching out on the streets. At the same time, she was forced to live in 4 restrictive walls, and she wrote a very holy book to her eyes, The Death of Arthur. That discovery was the entrance to a new life, and to a new universe of pleasure, the universe of books. Jeanette used to take books out of the library and read them and keep them carefully under the bed until her mom found out and burned them all. That fire was a redemption fire through which she started to love literature. Speaking of love, when she turned 16, she fell in love with a girl that she had previously converted for church, into church. So she was expelled by her mom when she found out. Her mom found out and expelled her out of the fanatics community. That was the turning point when she left that wrong cradle. And this is when she started to live her life. Mrs. Winterson decided normality for her. Skirts, marriage, obedience. But facing all that, she decided to be happy. She started a life with all sorts of jobs, driving an ice cream van, a mental institution, and she entered Oxford in '79. She had made it. She was finally her own hero. In 1984, when she was 24, she wrote her own book.
Can we stop now? Let's just talk to these guys. Okay, we stop that. Okay. Enough. Don't worry about the past. We're here.
Bueno, y después...
Alright, so many books came afterwards, and like she said, you all know about them, and the important thing is about her. The important thing is about listening to her own words, which is the best way of putting her ideas. I would like to start by raising an issue on why can you be happy when you can be normal? You write that in your memoirs, and you claim that there are two different types of writings. The writing you write and the writing that writes you. And I have always wondered, when I read your books, I always wonder which is your type.
Both. Because the thing about writing is that you can be proficient at it, you can put in your 10,000 hours, and you can know how to do whatever it is you have to do. And you should do, because writing is a craft, it's a profession, it's something you need to do well to understand, but it's something more than that as well. So everything that you know, everything that you are, can be brought into service of the thing that you're working on. But at some point, that thing will begin to have a life of its own and start talking back to you. You have a dialogue with yourself before you can have a dialogue with anybody else. The thing starts to occupy a bigger space than either the screen or the page in front of you or the room that you're writing in. It begins to become a virtual world, because that's what writing is. It is a virtual world, and it's also the first interactive experience. Long before we were thinking of doing this with machines and computers, we were doing it with books, because when you read, you are in a dialogue yourself, both with the text and with the writer. We're in conversation all of the time when we're reading. You know how it is when you read a book that you particularly love or that you're interested in. You start talking to it, don't you? And you say things like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen, or that really should not have happened, or I want to change the ending. And sometimes you do change the ending. Have you ever had those conversations with a friend where one of you's saying, that didn't happen at all, it's not like that, it's like this, and you look at each other with fury, because this is a book that means a lot to each of you, but to each of you it's also a different book. which is a very strange thing. About certain books, certain text, strong text, is that although it appears to be the same thing on the page, it reads very differently to different people, because it has that openness, that sense of possibility. It's more like a chemical reaction than anything else, and you bring your chemistry to the chemistry of the text, and then it creates a third thing, which is your text, which is neither the book itself nor what the writer intended, whatever that means, but something which is a shared place between you both, because writing is a place. It's an experience, but it's also a place. You know, it's a place to go. It's somewhere to live. So for me, thinking about the books that write me, it's that moment when you have heated everything up to story temperature, because that's what you have to do. You heat the fire to do the work, and it gets hotter and hotter, and at the beginning you have to tend it and be careful of it and make sure that something is there, that there's more than a spark, that there is something like a fire. And then when it's roaring away, you can't throw anything on there. You can put mattresses on there, you know, old tires, you know, half the shed, you know, whatever you want, and it will be consumed by this fire that you've made into something else. And I do think of it as heating yourself up to story temperature. And then we have made something, I make something, and then it goes out to you, and then you make something else with it. That's why I think fan fiction is such a great idea. You know, it's one of the things I love about the internet, what the internet's made possible, that we go on there and we rebuild the stories. You know, we make them into something else, and we can do that. Sometimes it happens in a way which can be a little unsettling, you know, like when Hollywood just takes every character it can think of from literature and shoves them all together in the same movie. You know, that's a bit of a worry. But at the same time, these things are not fixed. You know, it's not tablets of stone. You know, these things are fluid, they're moving. Above all, stories are alive. And that's what really matters. They are alive. And everybody who's writing is writing with something that already exists and is alive. It's not a dead thing. It's not a dead body. You know, I've worked with dead bodies. I used to work putting the makeup on the corpses, you know, because I don't like a lot of noise. So for me, a job working in an undertaker's was a good job. You know, it was quiet and I could think. But so I know what a dead body looks like, feels like, smells like, actually. But literature is not that. It's a living thing, and that's why it causes so much debate between us, why we disagree so violently, why it's always so much to argue about, why it will never be settled. Literature's not a question that you can answer. It's a question that you go on asking, and it goes on asking you every possible question. And that's the kind of literature, from the inside as a writer, you know, it's beginning to write to you. It's not some kind of crazy automatic writing where you sort of sit down and close your eyes and hope something will happen. Rather, it's a feeling that you are working the best that you can, and also that you are accessing aspects of your mind and yourself that are not available to you under normal conditions, and that's perhaps the most thrilling moment, where you know that you've reached another place, not reachable, and a good thing it's not reachable in everyday life. If it were reachable, we go crazy, and writers do. You know, this whole thing about creativity and madness is often the connection between that place, which should be accessed in safety and not every day. You know, it's too easy to go mad.
Too easy.
It's much better to try and keep your sanity and to go on working.
Y de esas dos formas de escribir.
Hang on. I've got to do my rabbit. Hold on. Yeah, go on. Okay.
De esas dos formas de escritura.
Out of those two different types of writing, which way is more dangerous for the writer? Which one is more dangerous for yourself, Jeanette? The one you write, or the one that writes you?
There's no danger. in doing everyday work, not at all. The only danger comes when you are working at a different level. And I always say to my students at Manchester, I'm like their mother. Actually, I'm like the worst possible idea of a mother. Which is, I say to them, you have to look after your body. Don't give me this shit about writing happening from the neck up, because it doesn't. It happens with everything that you are. It happens with your gut. It happens with your bowels. It happens with your heart. It happens with your digestive system. And it's better if you're well, if you're strong, and if you do take care of yourself, if you eat properly, if you sleep properly, if you're ready for work. And too many writers have ruined their lives, either because they've had too much to drink, and they've ruined a lot of other people's lives along the way, let's face it. Too much to drink, too many drugs, just too much crap in there. And Ray Carver, the American short story writer, used to talk about it really as a way of trying to douse the fire, because it was too much. And that's the craziness that you can get to, because it can be too much. And because we like to have an idea of the writer or the artist as somebody who is crazy, we play along with all of this, and actually it's very bad. It's bad for people who work in the arts at a high level, and it's bad for us, this sort of myth of madness, because whatever creativity is, it's on the side of health. It is the thing that will keep you sane and well, not the thing that will drive you nuts unless you let it, and not the thing that will destroy your life. I think always literature, art, wherever you find it, whether it can be music, it can be paintings, installation, dance, I'm not going to separate here, is a way of expanding your mind and calming you down, so that you're not always in a panic. Modern life is all about panic. And when you take time to read a book, you're not in a panic anymore. When you go and stand and look at that one picture in the gallery, not with 100 million tourists and their fucking iPads trying to take a picture of it, but when you're actually looking at it and you allow the thing to work on you, then something is happening. That's what I meant earlier about that dialogue that happens, that conversation, whether it can be a silent conversation. But it's an encounter with something that is not you, that is not your preoccupations, that is not your concerns, that is not your life. But that encounter feels both vital and real if we allow it to happen. And that's not craziness, that's mental health. And the way we're going, we're dealing with everything at the moment is so mad. And I do mean this business of people rushing into a gallery and not seeing anything. A picture gallery is the one place where you're meant to look. I mean, what is the point of going in if you're not going to look? Which doesn't mean holding up your iPad and sticking your headphones on and I think we need to spend time with the art objects that we're meeting and not be afraid of them. In some ways, it's just like the cult of biography, where you're always trying to find out about the painter, the writer, the musician, whatever, instead of actually doing the difficult job of finding out about the work. There are all kinds of distractions that we can offer ourselves from a real-life engagement with this thing which is full of energy. These are like batteries passed down through time. These are energy sources that you can plug yourself into. When I'm tired, I'll read a poem like I'd have a shot of espresso, because it just gives me a hit, lets me go forward a little bit in the day. We can use art like this, but we need to come to it in the right spirit. And often when people say, it means nothing to me, it doesn't speak to me, first of all, they're saying something about themselves, not anything about the artwork in question. And are we giving it time? Are we giving it the time that it needs? It doesn't have to be forever, but it does have to be about time. It takes time to read a book. You can all skip read or just read every other page, if it's a kind of airport thriller or whatever. We can, when we watch TV or movies at home, even if they're really good, even if they're great. You know, we're always pressing the pause button and going and making a cup of tea or talking to your mother on the phone, you know, or shouting at the kids or putting the washing on. And this disrupts the time that we need sometimes, just to spend with the piece of work, like you would with a friend, you know? I was going to say you'd talk to your friend, but actually you wouldn't, would you? You'd sit across the table and look at your iPhones. But it's that sense of connection that we need with people and that we get with art in all its forms, but particularly, I think, with reading, because unless you're reading to a child or you have a reading group, it's something that you're doing silently, and you're doing it by yourself. So it's a very private space in a world which is against privacy of any kind now. You know, Mark Zuckerberg said that privacy is an anachronism. Well, he would, wouldn't he? But there's also some truth in that. Where is the private space? You know, everywhere is CCTV. Everything has got to be uploaded immediately from your phone onto your social media site. So where is the private space that cannot be managed, policed, controlled, advertised, bought or sold? Only in your head. Nobody can get inside your head if you don't want them to. So when you're reading this book, that is truly a private conversation and a private place. Go on.
Es curioso la palabra. Okay.
It's funny what you said, because normally we tend to link art to craziness, but we should interpret it as a sane person. An artist or a writer is a sane person, and one of the things that I was looking forward to ask you is whether art saves you.
Hold on, I need some water. Would you like some water?
No, it's okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Without question and without doubt, look, I was brought up by very religious people, and I was supposed to be a missionary. Okay, well I am. I just can't do anything about that. I am a missionary. And of course I want to save souls. You know, I want to save all of your souls. I want you to be free. Yeah? But the thing that's deep in me, that whole background with the church, is not something that I can run away from, because it is part of who I am. We can't run away from our past. It's always there. So you have to find a way of both acknowledging it, accepting it, working with it, recognizing sometimes that it's a little bit crazy, or that it's even some sort of a construct. You know, of course I'm not in a gospel tent shouting for Jesus, but I know that there are similarities, and I just think, all right, this is how I was brought up, this is how I was trained, let me use it, but let me use it for things that matter to me, and that interest me, and that I think are worthwhile. You know, we can all do that. But when I was growing up, I needed to know that there were different worlds outside the one that I was living in, which was very narrow. It was like looking at imagine the blue planet in space, but looking at it through a tiny arrow slit, you know, the tiniest lens. That's what my world was like. Out there was a blue planet. And I had some sense that it did exist. And there's a line in my first book, which in Spanish is Fruta Prohibida, I think. Terrible title. But in English, it's got a much better title, which is Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. I blame her. She's my publisher. So the thing is that it was very narrow, it was very constrained. But in Oranges, there is this line where it says, what I want does exist if I dare to find it. And I knew I had to find it. And books were, for me, books and doors are the same thing. You open them and you go through into another world. And books were also flying carpets, like something in the Arabian Nights. You know, a book would take me somewhere I hadn't been and couldn't go in my body, but I could go there in my mind and experience all this. I didn't care about being a poor child in a crummy northern town with crazy parents. I wanted to be the hero of my own life. And when I read books, I saw that that was possible. And so I knew I could escape. And above all, and the Bible actually helped me with this, and which is why I'm always pretty soft on the Bible, is that I needed to have language. I needed to have language in order to explain to myself what was happening to me, and therefore to be in control of it. You know, when we have the words for our circumstances, for our situation, we don't feel so powerless. We don't feel so threatened. We don't feel so afraid. You know, when we don't have the words, we say, don't we, you have your own phrases in Spanish, but we say, I don't know what to say, or we fall silent. We say, you know, I can't, it's on my chest, I can't speak, or the words are in my throat. And when people are in trauma, when something terrible has happened, they don't speak, you know, they fall silent. We need the words. And human beings invented language. It's ours. And we didn't invent language to say, where is the woolly mammoth? Or, can you get me a new axe? You know, we invented language because we wanted to talk about inner states, what happens inside, as well as what happens outside. And we've developed this very powerful tool, which is language, in order to communicate on every level, from the most basic, can you tell me the way to the station, to the most profound, my heart is broken, what shall I do? Language allows that to happen. It's so profound and so simple, so beautiful, so everyday, and yet so unique. And we often overlook or undervalue this astonishing thing. So I needed language. I did get it from the Bible, because it's well written, no question. And I got it from those other books that I was reading when I was a child and a young person. So I was absorbing, soaking up words at every level, so that I could use them and so that I could be free.
En ese sentido,
Hang on.
you prefer if I speak
No,
to you
you
in
speak
English?
in Spanish, because it's
Yeah?
better for everybody except me.
Okay.
Oh God, no, it looks like a beard now, doesn't it? It's no good, it's no good. Okay, right, go.
Are you ready? Yes?
Oh, yes, I'm ready.
Okay. En ese sentido,
So in that sense, have you ever said, or you have actually said at some point, that you were angry at some point and you stopped being angry at a certain point? And my question is, at what point do you stop being angry? Was it through literature? Was it through those words with which you have built your safe space where you could live the life you wanted for yourself?
This is very worrying.
Because it's really like Mark Ruffalo playing the Incredible Hulk. And in fact, he is asked that question in one of those, whatever they are, Fantastic Four franchises or whatever. How did you learn to control your anger? And he says, because I realised that I'm angry all the time. So, I'm not angry all the time. I mean, there's a lot in this world to be angry about, isn't there? We live in a world of inequality and social injustice and horror of what we're doing to our beautiful blue planet. Donald Trump. You know, there's plenty to be angry about, and we should be angry about these
we
things.
have reasons.
Yeah, good reasons. But that's different. It's different from some corrosive, self-destructive anger, yeah, which really destroys yourself and other people around you. You know, those angry people who are always shoving past you down the street, you know, yelling into their phones and yelling at you and kicking the dog and shouting at their wives and children. You know, that's no use. They really need to go and get some therapy. So, I mean, I'm married to a therapist, so I would say that. But It's important. We live in a very violent world, and we could do with living in a less violent world. But part of it is it's that question we were talking about earlier about your past and where your deep angers come from. If you think, I am an angry person, that's not a statement and then we go on to the next statement. That should be the beginning of a long series of questions to yourself about how this is happening. What you'd like to do about it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's really quite old-fashioned stuff, like what sort of a person do I want to be? Do I like the person I am? Not in a kind of hairspray advert because I'm worth it, but really asking that, would I like to meet me? Did I do something today which made me ashamed? And if the answer is yes, then we reflect on it. Above all in life, I want people to be conscious, not to go through life in a blur or through habit or like some sort of self-programmed robot or operating system. And if we are conscious, then we ask ourselves questions about our behaviour all of the time, because it does matter. Mm-hmm. When somebody said to Gandhi, what is the most important thing that you could pass on to us, and he just said, be kind. Mm-hmm. Which is the opposite of being angry, of course. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of kindness goes a long way. It does. How nice it is when somebody just smiles at you in the street or takes your bag for you or says, do you want to sit here, or how are you? Or just a moment of ordinary human concern. We love that. And it's about being the person who gives it as well as the person who's pleased to receive it. And all of us have something, and I know you will all recognise this because it's a really bad thing and you have to teach yourself not to be it. You know how if you have a really good day, you have a great day and you're feeling, and then on the way home something crappy happens. Mm-hmm. Just one thing, or maybe at the end of the day your boss shouts at you or whatever. You remember that. And the whole of the good day disappears into this one stupid bad thing that's happened. And that's when you start to get angry. And that's when you go home and kick the cat, and shout at the kids. And it's something that we have to get over. And that's about being conscious. People call it mindfulness. I'm not so sure. You can give it whatever name you want. But it is important to try and be conscious. And that's why I think reading in particular is such a good habit to cultivate. Because regular reading, it really does calm the blood pressure. It steadies your breathing, helps you to think more widely about yourself and your world. It's exactly not that kind of reflexive, impulsive behaviour of just get out of my face now. So I had to deal with my anger towards my parents, of course I did, and towards what I often saw as injustice about me as a woman or as a working class woman, all of those things that are real, and think, right, I'm going to do something about this. I'm not just going to sit here being angry. Mm-hmm. I will be the change I want to happen. And that is a very good way of dealing with anger, to get out there and do something. Make it work, make it happen. The other thing is really, it's back to this boring thing. Nobody ever believes me with this. Go for a run, get on your bicycle, go swimming. If you're a person who's angry all the time, get it out of your body. Because bodies are made to work, and a lot of our tension and rage is because we sit around all day, and we never take our bodies out for a walk. You do more for your dog than you do for your body very often. We're animals. As well as being human, and we have to look after the animal part, and often it's the animal part that is just really fed up at being kept in all day, not seeing the sunshine, not being looked after. So it's this business of, do I look after myself well? If the answer is no, you're not going to look after anybody else. Even if you think you're the most caring person in the world, secretly you probably want to kill them all.
Es sorprendente por
It's surprising because despite the time that you were angry and you have had a lot of reasons for that. All your works, from the first book in 1984 to the last one, all your works celebrate the redemption love. How our lives expand, how our lives become more marvelous when we love someone, when we learn to love that someone. So, the question is, what's love for Jeanette Winterson?
It's so many things. It's so many things. Obviously, it's human interaction. I'm fortunate because I've got a great partner, I've got good friends. But I think love is wider than that. It's actually an attitude. It's the way that you approach the world, rather than simply something that happens with another person or something that you feel. It's an attitude of mind and heart, I think, love. And it's a value system. It's almost a belief system. In 1992, I wrote a book called Written on the Body. Again, it's got a weird title here. It's not Written on the Body, is it? Your fault. What's it called? I think it's called Written on Skin or something like. I'm going. It's
the same.
What is it? Is it written on the body?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So good. All right. So I've written this book with a really good title. That's the same in Spanish. Just start again. It's not her fault. And so Written on the Body, it has a line at the beginning, and I hope because this gets translated well, because it's rather a beautiful line. People have it on T-shirts. I wander around the world thinking, I wrote that. Anyway, the beginning of the book is, why is the measure of love loss? Why is the measure of love loss? Because love always seems to be about broken hearts or death, or somebody who goes away and doesn't come back, or that we're left all alone. And indeed that book is about a series of losses. And it was 92, it was 20 years later really, when I published Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal, where I talked about Written on the Body and that beginning, and saying that I've changed my mind. I don't think that love is about loss anymore, even though it's a good line. I think, for me, I realised that love could be as reliable as the sun. That whether I wanted it to be there or not was really not down to me. It was just going to happen. That sun was going to come up every day. That there would be the daily rising of love. And that love was something dependable. I couldn't always see it. I can't always see the sun. And there are terrible days. Believe me, I live in England. So, I know about this. But the sun is there. And I felt that I'd understood something important for myself then, and I was freed from somehow being yoked or tethered or handcuffed to this idea that love had to be about loss. So I had to break a personal myth, and I didn't know that I really wanted to, because we like our personal myths, don't we? We like, especially as we get older, we develop, ideas about ourselves and the world, and we don't always want to change them, but we have to. And I did, because I thought this is simply not true, and it's not true in my life anymore. So this has to go. But there's so much that's been written about love in every language across the world. There's Dante writing in the Paradiso at the end of the Divine Comedy, talking about love that moves the sun and the other stars. He didn't know the sun wasn't a star. But it's a lovely thing, the idea that love moves the sun and the other stars. And then there's Freud saying that man must love or he will get ill. And even in the Bible, whether you like it or not, overarching the entire text is that God is love. And the teachings of Christ are that we should love our neighbour as ourselves. Nobody ever does. All these Christians turning back the refugees and the immigrants, Christians don't read the Bible. I know this. It's far too troubling for them. Because there is so much in it about love. Mrs. Winterson was never quite happy with those parts. She preferred the Old Testament, where everybody gets wiped out a lot. But don't have to be religious to notice that there was a psychological change in humanity, that we were looking for something else, not just wiping everybody out. Religion at its best is meant to be about forgiveness, about welcoming the stranger, about looking after the widows and the orphans, and about recognizing that there is much more to life than the material world. Not in a negative way. These idiot rednecks in the Bible Belt America who say, the planet doesn't matter because, it's not our real home and Jesus will come. You just think, oh, fuck off. It's so disrespectful and it's also so stupid. That's the wrong kind of thinking, that material things don't matter. But the right kind is to say, surely life is not just about money, that money is not the highest value, which is where we are at the moment in the neoliberal experiment. I think love is the highest value. It's not money, it's not power, it's not greed, it's not violence, it's not everything that has tried to destroy us and brought us to our knees and ruined our relationships one with another and emptied the planet of its resources as we try and turn all of the people and all of this planet into monetary value, something that a few people can spend. That's horrible. So for me the highest value is love, wherever it is found and in the widest sense of the word. I don't only mean romantic love, I don't mean that at all. I mean love, the really scary stuff, the four-letter word in English, which challenges us every day. And there's also a lovely bit in the Bible, which is that love, it's in Song of Solomon actually, love is as strong as death. And if you think about that, that's a very interesting coupling or pairing, that love is not stronger than, but is as strong as death, which we feel is the great finality, the border from which no one returns. And here's this suggestion that love is bigger than that. And that's very profound, and that's worth a meditation in itself. And of course in our lives death will come once to each of us, but love could happen every day. That seems to me to be the optimist's reading of the world, but I am an optimist. How did that happen? I don't know. Okay, what do you want to ask me now? This is terrible. This is like an evening with Jeanette Winterson, isn't it? Okay. I put these in my ears.
Some water?
I'd love some water, thank you. And you can all hear me drinking it now, I expect.
¿Qué me dices de los...
And what could you tell me about the readers? Because the truth is that in my opinion, based on my own experience, that I imagine that it's a shared experience among all the audience that we have here today, we'll ask them now. You are not happy just tempting the reader. You want to change us, you want to seduce us, you want to make us feel free. I would like, this is like how I feel when I read you. I would like you to explain to all of us what relationship you establish with your readers. How do you live it?
It's an invisible relationship, and it's one over which I have no control, ever. Because I don't know any of you. You know a lot more about me than I know about any of you. Unfortunately, you know it through my books, not through Hola magazine. But I can't imagine a reader, because that reader is always changing, and it depends which country the book is published in and who is likely to be reading it. It's likely, my reader is likely to be female, because generally, not always, men don't read books by women.
11%.
What?
11%.
Yeah, of men admit to reading books by women. There's been lots of surveys. They're very worrying surveys. But there's nothing we can do about it at present. So it will probably be an audience where the majority of people will be women. And it will be a mixture of all ages, which always interests me. So people who weren't born when I began writing, people who are my age, people who are much older. And that's lovely, because I feel it's a real cross-section for the audience. But nobody can really, unless you're writing a newspaper article or a magazine article, and that magazine or newspaper has a target audience, which then you absolutely understand, and you write very specifically. That's its own thing. But writing the fiction, no, you just don't know. And also, I'll be dead, won't I? And then I'll have no idea who's reading my books, unless there is, you can when you get to across the boundary. But I don't think that's probable.
Creo que ha llegado.
Yeah?
Creo que ha llegado el momento.
I think it has come the time to speak about Carlo Ben Oscar and my Paul.
Oh dear, yeah, he'll be dead soon. Yeah, and I mean, Nigel is happy to say at any opportunity, and will say it, that women can't be writers, and that even Jane Austen is rubbish. And he says this as though he's offering back some truth to a world that is either deceiving itself or just desperately wants to hear this thing that he, the enlightened man, has to tell us. What can you do? You just have to walk away. So we're still in a world where which is unequal in terms of gender, but that has changed so much. And although we're still looking to go on with the change, and everybody who is sane should be a feminist, we need also to be celebrating the amazing things that women and men working together have done to change the world, because feminism is good for men as well, and it's important that we recognize that an equal society will be a happier society, as well as one that is more just. And when that happy day comes, it may be that men start reading books by women.
A happy day.
Yes.
Happy day, maybe. Es curioso porque en los...
It is curious because
en los
You can do it in Spanish.
Okay.
Right.
En los últimos días que...
in the last days that you've been here in Madrid, there has been some kind of controversy around an event that takes place in León. It will take place during the next days. The controversy comes because in the poster there was just male names, as if women didn't exist, or even worse, as if putting female names on the poster of that Congress made being less noticeable. When I saw that controversy and when I saw what happened, the only word that I could think about was patriarchy.
Unfortunately. Yes, and we still switch on the TV and we see a panel which has got 5 men on it and nobody worries, and if it's 5 women on it, everybody thinks, oh no, the feminists have taken over, what shall we do? There's always that imbalance still, and there are some men who feel a lot more comfortable in a room full of people who are like them, and don't feel so comfortable if women are involved, because women do have different style of doing things. But that should be a benefit for everyone. And that's why, we have to go on working, fighting, arguing about this stuff. I'm political because the world is political. Everything we do is a political act.
Language also.
Everything, yeah. If you say I'm not political, all you're saying is either I'm stupid or I'm lazy. It's one or the other. Because even the food that you put on your plate is a political act. Where did it come from? How were the animals treated? What was it? Was it slave labor that was picking the salad this morning? Was there a gang master putting people in a caravan, 16 of them in there and paying them €1 an hour? How was it grown? Was it taking water away from an indigenous group of people? Was it chopping down bits of the rainforest? And this is just the food on your plate. Never mind the plate underneath and the table underneath the plate. Everything that we do is connected. Everything. We can't just parcel it off into little bits and say, well, this doesn't matter, I don't have to think about that. Unfortunately, in our world, we have to think about everything, because if not, it's irresponsible. The clothes that we're wearing, where were they made? In a sweatshop in Bangladesh? How was the cotton grown? Things that we don't want to have to think about. It's so tiring. But we still have to do it. And part of that, I think, is thinking about women, because across the world, women are historically and presently the bottom of the pile in terms of labour and in terms of wages. And even when women in the West are doing well, we know that we're still paid often up to 1/3 less than men for the same jobs. So it's really not over. There was just a big scandal in England at the BBC, which is a publicly funded company, when the salaries of the top third in the organisation, most of whom are men, were published, and without exception, every woman was paid substantially less. And then we went, we didn't notice. We're really sorry. We're good. We didn't mean to be paying you much less than we're paying ourselves. And this is a sort of astonishing apology, as though some Martian was actually doing the pay packets every month and nobody had any idea what was going on. So, and it's really boring, isn't it, challenging things all the time. When you just want to sit down with your kids or your friends and have a glass of wine and read a book. But we have to do it, and so don't give up on activism, don't give up on protest. But this is really about don't give up on your values. Right at the beginning we talked about, well, how do you get a personal value system? How do you know what things are important to you, what you believe in, what you want to stand up for, or what matters? And it won't all be the same for all of us, although we're all probably quite liberal and we have roughly the same views. Individually, we'll argue and we'll debate. That's fine. But standing up for what you believe in really matters, and not apologising for those things. The neoliberal experiment apologises for nothing. It just lays waste to all of us and says, oh, well, it's about shareholders, it's about market forces. Again, like these things have dropped down from the sky to take over our lives. In fact, it's about choice. And they don't apologise. And neither should we. We should simply say and be saying, not acceptable, or not in my name, and fighting for those things that matter.
The fight continues.
It does. With everybody here in this room.
Yeah.
And me. We're going to ask you I can ask you some questions, that'd be fun. But you can ask me some questions if you want, because we haven't got much time.
Podéis hacerle las preguntas.
If you want, we can pose the questions that you want.
Oh, I can hear you speaking in English.
Yeah?
And I wanted to say, you have been witty, never self-pitying, brilliant. Especially, I remember very warmly your comments on T.S. Eliot's quartet poetry. The love you expressed.
Have we got any microphones, guys?
The love you expressed in those lines, not only towards the quartets themselves and your understanding of them, but also your appreciation of books.
Thank you.
All books, text, paper. You have given me a lot of pleasure. You have inspired me.
It's good, it's good.
I thought I had to come. I saw you at Segovia yesterday, I think. And I said I must go because I didn't do it then to thank you. Thank you, Jeanette, for a wonderful, wonderful life, yes, and work.
Thank you very much. Gracias. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. Well, no, she's going to say, yeah, but...
Well, thank you for being here and for all your beautiful books. I wanted to ask you, as an aspiring writer, what is your writing routine? Do you write every day? How do you do it?
Well, it changes over time, and you mustn't worry about that. But if you're starting out, I think it's really important. Two things are really important. One is to turn up for work. Nothing will happen unless you do. You have to be there doing it. and not wait for inspiration. So I don't know what you know. Everybody's personal circumstances are different. Not everyone can say, oh, I'll write every morning from 6 till 8. But I think you have to make a deal with yourself at the beginning of any project and say, okay, what time can I reasonably put aside, and how can I protect this time and honour it? Because you're making a deal with yourself, and that really matters. So try that. That does matter. And also be prepared for things to go horribly wrong. The problem with creative writing courses in schools and blah blah is that they don't say often enough that you need to be able to throw things away and not worry about it. Just chuck it away. And don't panic if the thing isn't working. The creative self doesn't yield to pressure in the same way that the executive self does. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to put the timer on and get this done in 50 minutes. Any of those mad self-help books that help you divide up your day. It just doesn't work like that, because it's that sense of play and immersion in it. So you might go to your study or your writing desk or wherever you go, the cafe, and nothing might happen for a few days, and this is frightening. But you have to trust that your unconscious self, or your bigger self, is working something out too, in that place where you go. Later it will probably do it when you're doing other things as well. But I like people to start with quite a lot of discipline and not too much distraction, because we live in a very distracted society. So you have to find a way not to be so distracted, however you do it, and then stick with the thing, and see what happens, see what comes out. And if it's rubbish, let's just say it's rubbish, bad luck, don't keep it at all. Don't think, oh, I'll put it in a drawer, or I'll look at it later, because if it goes in the drawer or in a file and it's crap, it will come out of the drawer and the file and be crap. Because there's no magic in the drawer or the file, right? So I have at home, where I live, I have a wood-burning stove, and my studio is very bare. It has a big table. I don't have very many books in my studio. I have them in my library. A big table, different chairs. Actually, I have 3 tables because I work on different projects. But I have the wood-burning stove, and I'm sure you've seen or know about the opera La Bohème, where Rodolfo just burns his play in order to keep everybody warm at the beginning. Well, it's like that in my studio, because I just burn everything. I print it off, because you can cheat yourself on the screen. Everything looks good, with a Word program on a nice, pretty Apple computer. Just print it off, and if you think, oh, really not. If you burn it, and if you can't burn it, I don't know what you want to do with it, but just shred it up, give it some children at school for their hamster cages, whatever, but get rid of it.
Thank you. Now I can say, I'm doing this because Jeanette Winterson advised me.
Every time you get rid of something, so it's that balance between knowing what to throw away and knowing how to keep faith with the thing that you're working on, to let it gain its own life.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being here. I have only one question. I have a lot of them, but not so many time.
Thank you.
But my only question is because there are some of your books I don't know how to say the name in English. La Niña del Faro.
Well, lighthouse keeping. Yeah. That's
yeah.
It's lighthouse keeping.
For me, your way of writing is like a big poem in fan fiction. So sometimes when I tell a friend I want her or him to read you, I say, okay, for me, this woman when writes is like if she does so metaphors, so big, so big things. Like for me, it's like there's a lot of music in your writing. I don't know if that's related because you were in a church growing up, so things of music and writing comes together. But that is my question. So how do you do? Because most of your writing, I have read a lot of books. My favorite is better to be happy better be normal than to be happy.
So, other way around.
So
the way it it works like this. If you think about how we learn the language, all of us as children, language, it begins in the mouth before it hits the page. We learn to speak before we learn to write. We learn by listening to our mother, to our brothers and sisters, to people around us. There are two things you can't do on your own, by the way. One is learn to speak a language well, and the other is to love. It's not like playing squash. You can't just hit the thing at the wall and hope to get somewhere. It's a communal experiment, both language and love. So we learn to speak by listening. So for me, when I'm writing, I think everything is breath, isn't it? And we all speak differently. We have different cadences, different inflections, different rhythms to the way that we speak. And this needs to be present in the writing. Because you're not writing a restaurant menu, you're trying to do something which is personal to the self. So to find that rhythm, that breath, it's good for me to do it out loud. So when I'm working, I never sit down. I hate sitting down. I hate it. So this is torture. So when I'm working, I'm always standing up, and so I have a desk so I can stand up at, and I'm typing away, blah blah. But I'm reading it out loud as I'm actually typing it, because the other thing is that we're so used to taking in vast bombardments of information in our world. We're reading everything constantly, all of the time. Billboards, bus stop notices, what's on the iPhone, we can't get away from language at its most banal all around us. So the eye goes faster and faster. So to slow that down, if you're reading, you get a natural pace. You hear your own natural rhythm. You can't rush it. It's why we still like being read to, why we like hearing stories, because it's that business of everything slowing down. We get the rhythm, and we go along with it, no matter how old we are. So when you're working, when you are looking at a sentence, you can hear if it's going wrong, instead of just rushing to the end and writing the next one. You use the techniques or the skills that poets use, and you make sure that all of those words are doing the work that they should be doing within the line, and the line within the paragraph, and the paragraph within the thought that's on the page. But it starts always with those words. So for me, that's it. So there's a musicality to it, because it's out loud continually, yeah. And yes, when I'm not writing, if I'm not in the garden, I'm listening to music.
And what kind of music?
Everything. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are classical musicians, and so I know a lot about classical music, and I love opera. I adore opera, so I go to that a lot. So there's that going on. But I'll also be listening to whatever the kids around me tell me I should be listening to. When I'm in the gym, and I'm watching YouTube or on TV, I've got the ear things in. So it's everything. And I think I like that. I like having influences, coming all around me, things that I wouldn't necessarily find myself. And having that. But when I'm working, some people have the radio on or whatever, not me, because I'm just talking out loud, not to myself, but to some midpoint in space, I think. Yeah.
Hi.
Where are you?
Hi, I'm here.
Where?
Here.
Where? Oh, you're over there. Okay.
Hi, Jeanette.
Hello.
So, the first book of yours that I read was Stone Guts. I think in Spain it's called Planeta Azul. A happy name. So, that was really important for me, that book. And there you have like a quote along the lines of only a poet could frame a language that could frame the world. And for me it was like obvious, it was like enlightenment, like doing maths. So my question is, how did you, what made you realize that the language of the world is the language of poetry? Thank you.
Well, by reading it. Although I didn't start with poetry, because I started with English literature, in prose, A to Z, because that's what was in my library. In libraries were very old-fashioned places and had books in them. So that was how I began. But reading any writer who's very concentrated on language and has a really personal style and voice, alerts you to the presence and power of words. So I didn't want to write like those writers, but I was absorbing from them, just as I did from the Bible, so many possibilities of how language could be so I could use language, it doesn't matter whether it's street language or whether it's language from the Renaissance. I want to be able to be in it and to use it and to read it and to write it like that, because you have to have, in a complex world, you need a language which is complex enough to talk about how things are, both the outside world and the inside world that we discussed. Because life has an inside and an outside, it's not just one thing. And I was talking in Segovia about language and saying, listen, how it is, it's worse for English people for obvious reasons. If you go abroad and you want to talk to somebody, you can maybe get yourself down to the railway station or order your meal in a restaurant. You can ask a few directions. You can get through it. But when you come to have say a conversation, even quite a simple one, if you don't have the language, you find that your thought, what you want to say, has to shrink to the level of the language available, because that's all you've got. You've only got so many words, so many phrases, so much grammar. So always everything is shrinking down, and of course it's very frustrating if you want to have a proper conversation. But imagine if that was your first language, if that was your mother tongue, if your language had been so reduced by the banalities of crap television and social media and emoticons and Twitter, and so that your language was tiny. And there you are, either full of rage or full of love or full of pain or full of difficulty, and the world around you want to talk about, and you do not have the language. And one of the worst things that's happened in schools is that we've said, oh no, it's got to be about democracy. We mustn't teach boys and girls, a literature that is too difficult or a language that's too hard for them. We have to teach them at their level. This is so insulting, and I almost think it's part of the neoliberal conspiracy. I do. Because if nobody has any language, nobody's going to be able to talk about anything. Nobody's going to be able to protest, to write, to speak. And that's just the outside world, let alone the difficulties and problems we face with our own struggles internally. So the bigger, the better, the stronger, the more powerful, the more varied your language is, the better chance you have at talking to yourself and others about the world, internal and external, that you find yourself in. There's nothing democratic about not giving our children the best possible language that we can give them. And that does mean the old-fashioned thing like, yes, please read some books, and no, it's not optional. And talking to them at a high level, and not thinking that the television will somehow educate them and then they'll come out as fully formed human beings, ready to change the world. It won't happen. And if we don't look after our kids, there'll be a tiny elite, because it's happening now, who will have the best education, the best resources, access to everything, art, culture, and we will make sure that they rule the world. We're going back to some fucking feudal system, where this tiny, tiny elite will be able to read, to write, to express, to have access, to participate. That's not a democracy. And that's not a world we should be encouraging at all. So again, don't go with the neoliberal bullshit about, oh no, we're just democratic, it's just the market, kids don't need this stuff, just give you a 2-year-old the iPad, everything is fine. It's not fine. Okay. Feel very strongly about that. I think we might be at the end. I should say that I have absolute confidence in young people. I was talking to someone earlier and saying there are some problems that I will have to work on with you, like climate change and capitalism. But there are some that are really just yours. What you do with social media, what you're going to do with artificial intelligence, what kind of a world, whether you want to live in one vast operating system, what you want to do with human relations, because I will be dead and you guys will not, quite a lot of you. So there's a point where the world gets passed on to the next generation, and all my generation can do, having made such a terrible mess of things, is to try and equip you to go forward, to be the change you want to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming here.
No sé si hay
It's great that you have dinner so late. If we were in Paris now, they'd all be leaving because they're so rude
No
to
sé
go and get their dinner.
una última, one last question, maybe?
What?
Maybe?
That'll be a good one. Oh, we finished. Are we finished? We're finished. Go on, okay.
Okay.
Where's the microphone?
I have it.
It's gone. Oh, we're doing one up here. Gee, I can't follow this.
Hi, Janet. I'm so very happy to be hearing you. I wanted to ask about autobiographical writing. How is this alchemy, taking things from life, your life, and then transforming it into text?
Okay.
And especially, how do you deal with, if you have it, like this little ego temptation to put yourself better than you were at the time and to explain, like to
Why do you think it has to be true? That's
¿Y por qué te crees que eso es así?
I mean, true as in factual.
alchemy.
Yeah, not true as in emotional truth and factual truth are very different. Very different things. Look, in oranges, it's okay, I love kids, you just make as much noise as you want, it's fine. I think that I wanted to use myself as a fictional character, so I called myself Jeanette, and that caused a lot of problems because at the time auto-fiction wasn't happening, and now it will be very simple and obvious and nobody would have a panic attack about it. But it was also a gender problem because, if sometimes Henry Miller would call himself Henry in his books, and nobody thought, this is obviously all about Henry Miller's inner life, probably because he didn't have an inner life, but it's because you assume that the male can take up so much space that he can also take up the space where he is a fictional character. And I thought, I'm just going to have that space because I want it. So that character wasn't about me as such, it was somebody who was also me. It can be, it's easy now because we know that there are avatars. We know that we can go online and we are not what we say we are. That's now become very clear. But fiction always does that anyway, and it doesn't matter if you think of it as auto-fiction or even autobiography, or you just think of it as fiction. Still, you as a writer, this is it. This place is the only place you can work from. You work from the self that you are, and that is a combination, multiplied many times, of your experiences, translated, changed, your emotions, also what you can imagine. All of those things come to bear on the project, and not one thing but multiple things. If you think how many billion neurons there are in the brain firing at any one time, making connections, we can make so many different connections, we can inhabit so many different possibilities, and that's what happens when you're writing, whether you're writing something which appears to be very personal, or whether you're writing something which is maybe a sci-fi thing set in the future or on another planet, or a historical novel that's set in the past. It's still you, the writer, putting everything that you are into that text. I don't really believe in that separation of subject and object. Anyway, it's bad science. So the temptation just to change it, you should change it. I was talking to my publisher earlier about, she likes a line of mine which is about reading yourself as a fiction as well as a fact. That you do read yourself as a story, as a narrative that you are telling. That's what your life is. It is a constructed, progressing narrative. And life is worse for us when we feel we can't change that narrative, that story at all. People are never more depressed, miserable, and hopeless than when they feel nothing can change, when they feel locked into a life, because we want to be in control of our own stories. We want to tell our own stories. And what fiction offers us is a chance to do that, whether we write it or we read it, to say, no, there's always another version of the self in the world. And of course you can change the ending. You know, if you've got something in your life and you're hurtling towards what looks like a really terrible ending, rewrite it. You know, most of life is not a law like gravity. It's propositional. We make it up as we go along. It's not fixed. It can change, and in fiction it does change, and that's why, right back at the beginning, I said to you, we often rewrite books. We can't help it. We condense the story in different ways. We tell it back to our friends or our children in different ways, and children get furious, don't they? They say, that's not what happened, or you've missed a bit out, because children are very literal. And we're not as we get older. We become less literal. And that in that sense, we're being truer to the processes of the mind, which isn't really interested in the facts. It's interested in what we do with them. Okay?
So,
can I stop now?
yes. Creo que
I think Janet is going to have some time for you to sign the copies you want.
One thing that will interest you, if you're interested in the future of artificial intelligence and operating systems, or where things are going now, I've been reading a lot about this. The real, you know, the wild side of where computing's going now is, you know, the thing that Google X are working on now is how we might be able to upload our consciousness into vessels less fragile than our own bodies, so that death doesn't need to happen. You know, this is the blue sky thinking that may not end up being blue sky thinking, but if that were to happen, if we were able to upload consciousness out of the body, then you could make multiple copies of yourself. The moment you're not here, you're not confined anymore to the material form. It's just like religion, but it's a different call on it. So once you've uploaded consciousness into something which is not the material body, which will decay and die, then you can, the multiple copies that you might make of yourself can each have slightly different iterations. So, you know, like those paper dolls you used to cut out for kids, and there'd be sort of 20 of them all holding hands, grinning horribly. It could be like that. So you can you could replicate yourself indefinitely once you're uploaded, which in my case is a terrifying thought, and I'll leave you with that.
Bravo.